Every loss of life is a tragedy. It's also motivation to double down and do everything we can to stop transmission and save lives.
What's up, guys? It's What's His Face. I know it's been a little while since my last video, but I'm back with a new look, focus, and name for the channel. Today we're going to be discussing 3 questions that you guys might have about the novel coronavirus. We're going to talk about such things as social distancing, personal responsibility, and flatten the curve. A few buzzwords that you might have heard. You're watching Inspiring Inquiry.
Coronavirus,
SARSCoV2,
COVID-19.
Okay, so what are these terms and what is the difference between them? First, I would like to preface this video with letting you know that my information comes from Johns Hopkins Medicine.org, National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, the World Health Organization, and the Center for Disease Control. The first thing I'd like to start with is the novel coronavirus. This is the type of virus that we're dealing with here. They are called so for their appearance. They have these pointed structures that cover the virus that cause this corona or crown-like look to the virus. There are hundreds of these types of viruses circulating amongst animals being passed around that haven't yet crossed over to humans. 7 are known to cause disease within humans, 2 of them being rather mild. One's like the common cold, and then another 2 that are still common but less severe than these other 3 that we're going to talk about. The other one being SARS, which originated in China in 2002 from a civet cat, or at least it was transmitted to humans from civet cats. They believe that these viruses were transferred from bats to another animal, but that's what the research says, but it's inconclusive. In 2012, MERS originated in dromedary camels in Saudi Arabia and actually has yet to be eradicated. And the third being SARSCoV2, which we're about to talk about in a minute. Now, these viruses are zoonotic in nature, which means that they transfer from animals to humans. A more familiar example of this could be something like rabies, that we can get from raccoons or different types of rabid animals, as well as salmonella that we get from undercooked or ill-prepared chicken. People around the globe more commonly contract the 4 that we talked about earlier, the milder ones, like 229E, NL63, OC43, and HKU1. 2 of them being discovered in the mid-1960s to be the cause of the common cold. All right, so the second term we're going to talk about is SARS-CoV-2. Now, this is the particular strain of the virus that is affecting us right now that we're dealing with. And on February 11th, 2020, the International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses announced the name of the novel coronavirus to be Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2. These things, the viruses are named for their genetic relationship, for their genetic structure. This one was particularly named for its genetic relationship with SARS, the original one that was found in 2002. They emphasize that they are related, but that they are different. From something that I was reading, it has to do with the types of amino acids that the spike proteins use to bond with the receptors on a cell, particularly like a respiratory cell, because that's what it affects in this case. And so that's where they choose the type of name that they're going to use for the virus. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is COVID-19. Now, that is the disease that is contracted from these viruses. And the World Health Organization, in fulfilling their role in human disease preparedness and response, officially named the disease on February 11th, 2020 to be COVID-19 caused by the SARS-CoV-2 strain of the coronavirus. Now, they did this based on guidelines previously established with organizations like the World Organization of Animal Health and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Unlike viruses, Diseases are specifically named in order to promote discussion around topics such as spread, prevention, transmissibility, severity, and treatment. Things that we are going to discuss in the next 2 parts of this video.
Because people sometimes go like this or blow their nose. They'll shake hands with you, touch a doorknob. 15 minutes later, you come by and do that. Then you touch your face, and that's how you get it.
Okay, so the coronavirus, that's the type of virus that we're dealing with. SARS-CoV2, that's the strain of virus that we're dealing with. COVID-19 is the disease that is affecting humans that get infected with that strain of the virus. So in this portion of the video, now that we've had a little recap, we're going to talk about what does this virus do. We're going to specifically talk about what it does in the body, the symptoms that you get, and then the way that it transmits between humans and animals, but mainly from human to human. All right, so SARS-CoV2, and due to the novel nature of the virus, more research is needed to better understand the exact workings of this virus. But published in Science magazine on March 4th, a group of science researchers, some Chinese science researchers, discovered ACE2 to be the particular receptor that this virus uses to enter a cell. And what is interesting about that is it's the same receptor used by the SARS-CoV 2002 Chinese virus, spread around in 2002-2003. From what I understand, once a spike protein attaches to a receptor, it's able to transfer into the cell through the membrane through that access point. Once inside the cell, the virus hijacks the cell's mechanisms that it uses to create different things to perform its function. Whatever function the cell is performing, it is using different materials and different processes to create things that it needs. Well, the virus hijacks that and gets it to use those materials and processes to create copies of the virus. So much so, in fact, that the cell becomes overwhelmed, bursts open, and the virus and its copies spread to other cells, infecting and repeating the process. All right, so once infected with the virus, the host immune system will respond in a number of ways to combat the invader, increasing the temperature, i.e. a fever, which leads us to the next portion, the symptoms. These are the symptoms associated with COVID-19. Now, apparently I've heard some people say, and I don't know this for 100%, but the first thing that you start out with is either a fever or a cough that has been described as a dry cough. Other things that follow are shortness of breath and a sense of tiredness all the time. A little bit less common, not that they're like really less common, but just less common than the main ones, are things like aches and pains, nasal congestion, runny nose, sore throat, and diarrhea was actually at the bottom of the list. Typically these symptoms are mild, but they start to build up over time. Some can even become infected and show no symptoms. And in fact, about 80% of the people who contract this virus won't even need special treatment. But 1 in 6 become very ill and have difficulty breathing, especially older folks and those with existing health conditions like high blood pressure, heart problems, lung disease, cancer, diabetes are definitely more likely to develop serious health complications due to this virus. Well, once you start getting these types of symptoms, you start spreading the virus. So now we're going to talk about transmission. How does this virus spread? Because once we start coughing and sneezing and feeling really bad, other people start to get it. So the way that this transmits from human to people, it is still unknown what role asymptomatic people may play in transmission. So that's people who don't show any symptoms, whether it be in the incubation period or they have it but they don't show any symptoms at all. Person-to-person contact is typically people within 6 feet of each other. It's thought to be the main way that this virus spreads. The virus is transmitted through respiratory droplets expelled when an infectious person coughs or sneezes, and then those float into the air. Especially like if you ever seen a beam of sunshine coming in from a window, and then you can look and you see all those little particulates floating through the air, some of that would be, if you were to sneeze into that, you would see how far that sneeze would go. Now, those tiny little particulates that don't actually land is called aerosol, and Director Fauci of the Institute for Allergies and Infectious Diseases, the one who has been a very, pointed spokesperson on the COVID-19 response task force set up by the president, has said that he doesn't have any reason to believe that it's in aerosol, which means that it will just stay in the air and won't fall down and drop. The evidence that he's seen says that it does land on things, and that's what we have to worry about. These droplets can land on mouths, noses, nearby things, surfaces, objects, and then can then be ingested into the body through those means. So if it lands on your lips, if it lands on your nose, it can easily get in there. If it gets on a surface or on an object and then we go and touch it without washing our hands, that's when we end up putting it into our mouth, around our eyes, and those types of things. As far as how long does the virus survive on a surface, the National Institute of Health and such cohorts as the CDC, UCLA, and Princeton University published in the New England Journal of Medicine, stating that SARS-CoV2 was detectable in aerosol for up to 3 hours, up to 4 hours on copper surfaces, 24 hours on cardboard surfaces, and up to 2 to 3 days on plastic and stainless steel surfaces. I'm going to go ahead and put up a graph so you guys can take a look at the graph that was posted by The Economist that was based on this study. Now that we know a little bit more about the virus and how it spreads, I want to move on to the last portion of this video. What can we do?
What are we going to do? How are we going to get through? What are the issues? And our job is to not scare people out of their wits right now, is to scare them into their wits. So what does this mean?
Well, what does this mean? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this portion of the video. We're going to talk about such hot new buzzwords as social distancing, flattening the curve, and social and personal responsibility. So in this portion, I'd like to talk about what we can do as people to help ourselves and help those in our community. Now, whether we like it or not, what we heard in this video, this virus is here and it is going to affect us and our country for the foreseeable future, for some time to come. Being aware and informed is the first step that we can take to start to make changes that are going to be able to combat this virus. Flatten the curve is the first one that I want to talk about. What does this mean and why is it important? Well, flattening the curve refers to lowering the number of infected people that will require hospitalization at any given time. Our hospitals are only built to handle a certain number of people. For example, in New York, they only have so many ICU beds, they only have so many ventilators, and a good portion of those are already being used up with people that are sick. Then what happens when a lot of people get sick and then they start to rush to the hospital because they can't breathe? Well, the small supply that they had of ventilators and beds and ICU units is going to start to get lower and lower until the hospital system becomes overrun with the amount of people that need care. So flattening this curve refers to us spreading out the time in which people are getting infected. If everybody gets infected at once, on a graph, which I'm going to put up, is going to show the number of people skyrocketing. And then eventually it's going to start to dip back down. Well, if we can flatten that curve to not go straight up, but to just kind of go like this, we're going to be in a better position to be able to handle this. Models have shown that the pace in which this virus spreads, that certain healthcare systems will be overrun and the amount of people who need intensive care is going to continue to go up, mainly ventilators. A good example of this is places like New York and Italy. Italy is in very bad shape right now. I suggest all of you go and take a look at what's going on in Italy and what's going on with their healthcare systems. So emerging evidence shows that the reason we're experiencing more infections in similar viruses such as SARS, the 2002-2003 virus, is due to people spreading it without knowing. prior to having symptoms or not even having any symptoms at all. What can we as individuals do to help prevent that from happening? The next buzzword, social distancing. What does that mean? Well, that means not going out unless it's absolutely necessary. Staying 6 feet away from any other person, especially if you're out in public. If you're at home or you have some sort of a gathering, you have to have people together, try to have 10 people or less in there. And really follow what's going on in your community. Is the disease in your community? If it is, you may need to ramp up some of these procedures. Most importantly, I can't emphasize this enough, stay home if you are sick. Call your healthcare provider, let them know the symptoms that you have, find out the nearest place that you can get tested, and try and go and get tested. Washing your hands with, for at least 20 seconds with soap and water. There was a video that Alton Brown did where he showed that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Alton Brown, but he's one of my favorites, that a bar of soap is the best thing to use. We have recently switched to using bar soaps instead of just the regular pump antibacterial, although the pump is a little bit easier for my children to use, so we still use it sometimes. We also use Dawn and things like that. But another thing that you can use is a alcohol-based sanitizer. Now, these sanitizers have to be at least 60% alcohol. Primarily use them after you have been coughing or sneezing, and when you do cough or sneeze, try and do it into the crease of your elbow, so that way you're not doing it like this and then it's still spreading around everywhere. And as I just did, and which we all need to try and avoid as much as possible, stop touching our face, putting our hands in our mouth. I know before this even happened, I was already attempting to stop chewing on my fingers. I've had strep throat 3 times this year, and I really didn't want it again. When I started thinking about what is it that I'm doing, how am I getting sick so often, I realized that I am constantly chewing on my fingernails. Now, it's something that I didn't, take into account. I didn't really think about it that much. When I was sitting there doing it, when it dawned on me, this is why you're constantly getting sick probably. Now, it is just correlative evidence, but I think it's a pretty good ringer for why I was getting sick, especially strep throat so often, is because I was constantly chewing on my fingers. Another thing that we need to do is frequently sanitize commonly touched surfaces. Your doorknobs, I have children, so I have a gate to the kitchen. We sanitize that thing as much as possible. And as far as washing your hands, I have my kids do it now before every single meal, making sure that they do it before every single meal, after every single meal, when they come in from outside, after they're done playing their DSs. I've really kind of ramped it up, which I don't think it's a bad thing to do in general. It's better hygiene, but we have started doing it even though we've been in quarantine since, I think it was the 12th or something like that, 13th. Somewhere around there. It was, Friday the 13th. That was the last time that I went out. But people are going to get infected. People my age and my girlfriend's age are not really so much the ones that we need to worry about. She does have difficulty breathing. She has to take breathing treatments anywhere from sometimes 2 times a day, sometimes not that much, but it's been upwards of 3 times a day. My son has chronic lung disease. These are the people that we need to worry about, as well as our older population. My particular job was I was a mobile dog groomer, and a lot of the areas that I serviced were places where there was a predominance of 60 and up, people. Some of my customers, ones that I care about very much, that I've been doing every 2 weeks for about 2 years now, just got done having a surgery and then, found out that he had cancer. So he was on chemo battling cancer. I stopped going to work because I didn't want to put my need for money over someone else's life. It's not really something that I can live with if I knew that he had gotten sick or someone had gotten sick on my behalf. This is what we need to take into account. It's not the younger people that we're worried about. It's the people with, immune compromised systems. It's the people who have trouble breathing, and it's our grandparents. It's some of our parents. It's, these are the people that we need to be thinking about and making our decisions based on. I hear a lot of people saying like, oh, I'm going to be fine, so I'm not worried about it. That's very troubling because we here especially in this country, as Americans, consider ourselves a collective. You know, we would like to think that we care about our neighbor and our community. And so what I can say is do your best to not just think about yourself, but think about other people's well-being as well, your loved ones and other people's loved ones, and try to do the best that we can in this situation. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching my video on the coronavirus. Be sure to like and subscribe down below. Come right back here for any more coronavirus or news related evaluations. And thank you so much. You're watching Inspiring Inquiry.